People who are new to BDSM generally have like 1,000 different questions. Why should I become involved with BDSM? Is it even safe? How do I meet people? How do I find a partner? How in the world do I even start? Where do I start? Welcome back to BDSM United. I am Primal Piggy, and today let's look at some of these different questions that have to do with becoming involved with BDSM. The why. We can start with the why. In a previous episode, I mentioned briefly that some people get involved in BDSM just to try to get some emotional or psychological healing from trauma, or maybe even some physical healing from trauma. And we briefly mentioned that BDSM, although it's therapeutic, it is not a replacement for professional therapy or the types of medications or treatments that you may need. And that oftentimes it is better to get a grasp on those things and get the professional help that you need, and then following that, maybe explore BDSM a little more, because oftentimes BDSM and these types of sexual practices and these kinds of things will oftentimes highlight or amplify pre-existing problems. Adding BDSM to a vanilla relationship that has problems already will oftentimes enhance or amplify those problems. Not all the time, but sometimes that can be true. And so oftentimes it's good to fix some of the problems and then explore BDSM afterwards. And so, you're new to BDSM, or you're curious, or you're thinking of experimenting, and what are some of the motivations for people who become involved in BDSM? Of course, BDSM stands for bondage and discipline, and sadism and masochism. Those two worlds collided together, and later down the road, people also saw that the DNS resembled dominant and submissive, although those things, as we said in previous podcasts, were already included in the B and D. But it's okay that it's there. And it's okay that people, teach all three of them. But really, bondage and discipline and sadism and masochism is what really makes up BDSM. And so, um, a lot of people approach BDSM because it's fun and it's exciting and it's spicy and it's sexy. And, in a lot of cultural contexts, it's taboo. And so, the fact that, popular culture makes such a fuss out of sex and sexually different people is enough to get a lot of people asking questions about sexuality and sex and BDSM and these types of play all on their own. And some people find comfort knowing that they're not as weird as they think they are or thought they were. A lot of people get involved in BDSM because they want to let their freak flag fly. And that's a great thing, some people just feel like they don't fit in with their peers. Some people feel they don't fit in with their religion. Some people feel they don't fit in with their culture. And, they suspect that maybe their sexual interests and their dark fantasies, they feel like they may be a little unusual or an extreme. But in BDSM, these same people find other people that have similar or sometimes even more extreme sexual preferences, and there's a certain camaraderie or friendship. BDSM is often about is more than just about a personal sexual encounters. It's also BDSM is also a culture and a community. And so, as a culture, we really have our own language. We have words have certain meanings. There is certain types of relationships that BDSM offers. There's certain, they call them relationship dynamics, and there's certain ways that people live and act and do things that are both sexual and non-sexual. So it really is, there's a psychology behind BDSM. There's a spirituality to BDSM. So BDSM quite a broad culture. Then it's also a community because we find, like I said, a camaraderie together, and oftentimes we people who are involved in BDSM, we find partners from inside. A lot of times from within our own community, within our local or regional community, we find people that are into the same things and have similar experiences, and so have certain experience levels that are necessary to safely perform the kinks that we like or want to try. And so it's very much a community. It was started as a community and as with its very own culture, and it was very much localized, and the internet really kind of brought it to everybody, and the internet really kind of changed a lot of things, and sometimes made it a lot more personalized and more about people's preferences, when previously, before the internet, it was much more community based. It was much more about a local community, and a local community with people that were more like elders and mentors, people that had more levels of experience and mastery in performing kinks, and then people that were learning and receiving, and that sort of thing. And so, um, really, a lot of people would come to BDSM because you just can't get these sensations anywhere else, not safely, anyways. And so, BDSM provides opportunities to have experiences that you can't get anywhere else. I mean, uh, where else could you go to find someone to that will play with live fire all over your body, or where else can you go that with someone who had to find someone who has a passion for forced orgasms, or will leave you after sex with the inability to walk for 20 to 30 minutes? Where else are you going to find somebody that wants to make patterns on your skin with hypodermic needles, or wants to tie you up with rope in a safe way, in an erotic way? And so that brings me to the next one: is a lot of people approach BDSM because they want to stretch their own imagination. Uh, People want a broader they want broader ability to have different types of play, or bring in different types of tools and toys into the bedroom. uh, in your bedroom, you can really be whoever you wish. You can be a torturer, you can be an obedient slave type person, you can play a lot of fantasy roles, you can rearrange or redecorate your bedroom or your living space to support these wild fantasies, and then you can experience your sex life and what you've been fantasizing about having in your sex life. And BDSM allows you to take charge of those fantasies and have fun with them, because a lot of times the people involved in BDSM will not be judgmental. We're all involved in kinky shit. And so, we're all somewhat, someone somewhere calls us all perverted, or all um, uh yeah, or all of us, they call us all deviants of some way. We are all deviants to somebody. And so a lot of people, they come to BDSM because the sex that they are currently having is boring. And there's only, you know there's only a few new experiences. Put the one thing into the other, put the one body part into the other part, rub the one body part against the other body part, and so, you know, kiss and fondle, and, wham bam, it's all done in just a few minutes. Sometimes people are having, come to BDSM because they're having trouble producing orgasms, or giving orgasms, or having orgasms. And, there's some people find that they need additional things like kinks and fetishes to help heighten their sexual mood, in order to just kind of bring them, even almost as like a foreplay, but to bring them to a climax. And so you'll be able to transform your life. BDSM is ultimately, it always has been transformative. And so it can change, you can explore your fantasies, of course, but it also can change who you are as a person. It has some through psychology and in different levels of training yourself. You can become better at some things. You can increase your tolerance level for pain or for suffering, and some of that translates from the bedroom into the real world. Uh, you can develop your personality of dominance and your character and your ability to assert your dominance, or you can, on the flip side of that, you can develop your yielding, your submissiveness, your submissive personality. You can really you can really learn through tasks and service how to really break wide and find a fulfilling submissiveness. And so, there's all different types of ways that BDSM can transform a person. In the beginning, BDSM people progressed from uh, submissive to the word master. We see master in BDSM a lot, especially in popular movies and things. But in the past, people attained the level of master through mastery, through the mastering of skills and techniques and protocols, and protocols being like how a submissive person is placed and how they act, and the rules governing between how a dominant and a submissive person interact in certain situations. And so protocols are about activities, rules are about things you do and do not do. And so BDSM sometimes has both of them and sometimes has one or the other. Oftentimes, at least there are some type of protocols in a power exchange type of relationship. And so that's kind of important to know that the B and the D, the bondage and the discipline, included all of these levels of service and protocol and all the things necessary to take BDSM from just performing kinks and to bring it into the relationship side of having a long term or an ongoing relationship based around BDSM. And so it's transformative, definitely. Uh, you know, uh, you really get an opportunity within BDSM to discover who you are, because communication is really big within BDSM. Relationship and consent are really the two big hallmarks of BDSM. It really requires they both kind of require each other, consent and communication. You have to communicate your consent after all. And so um you know you can people often start out in the world of BDSM with kind of a fuzzy understanding of who they are and what they want, and that develops as they explore, and as they grow and develop, they bloom into a person that oftentimes they didn't know was even inside of them. And you know oftentimes we look introspectively at ourselves, excuse me, how, to try to figure out how were you guided to become the person you are. Where did you get your biases from, or your religious or your cultural biases or your background? Did you think back when you were perhaps like a teenager and you started dating? What kind of advice did your parents or your peers give to you? Did they tell you that you had to play nicely with others and be a nice person? Perhaps they told you to respect your elders, find nice friends, do well in school, be polite and well spoken, have nice manners, you're only as good as your word, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And these are all maxims, and some of them are somewhat cliche, but you recognize those and many more. And all of these different biases and these different this guidance that you were given as you were raised, it helps inform who you are right now, and then you can decide for yourself which things you want to change and which things you want to keep. You can decide within BDSM whether you're more of a dominant, more of a submissive. Maybe you are a dominant to one person and a submissive to a completely different person. That's called a switch. And maybe you are more of a masochist. You like to receive pleasurable pain, or when you receive certain kinds of pain, you can translate them into pleasure. Or on the opposite side, maybe you're a sadist. Maybe you like giving people pleasurable pain or discomfort, or giving pain in such a way that they can translate it easily into pleasure. Maybe you're more of a top or a bottom. Maybe relationships really aren't for you and you just want to experiment giving or receiving, or both giving and receiving uh, kinks. Maybe it's impact, maybe it's bondage, um, maybe it's oral sex, or maybe it could be really any kind of thing. It could be, oftentimes with BDSM, it's not just the activity, but how you perform the activity. And with a certain, maybe it's more of a rough kind of sex. And so, like in oral sex, like a throat fucking or something like that. And so, you can decide whether you like pain and under what conditions, and you can figure out, whether you like to be spanked or flogged or teased or tickled or tied up, or maybe you prefer doing uh, those things to other people. And so you'll learn a lot about yourself and you'll gain experience in BDSM culture. You don't have to have everything figured out. When you come to BDSM, you don't have to be already, you don't have to come with a full glass. You'll definitely want to empty some of yourself out and refill some parts with what you learn that is new. Everyone is not easily classified as a dominant or a submissive. Sometimes people are a little bit more fluid. Like I said, sometimes they are a dominant in one relationship and they're a submissive in another one. It is important to know that we can have a little bit of dominance or submission in our personality, but oftentimes in BDSM, when we choose an identity, we really need to develop that identity for that one relationship. Consistency is really key when you're exchanging power one with another. When you're creating rules and protocols, it's important for whoever begins being in charge to continue to be in charge, and whoever begins being submissive to continue to be submissive throughout that one relationship. Uh, it's really difficult, it is getting in relationships can be messy because they involve other people. So it's really important not to jump into any relationships really quickly. And if you're adding BDSM to a previous relationship, you still want to take care to do the necessary vetting to see if you're even a match for BDSM with your current relationship. Maybe you need to keep that relationship vanilla, and just maybe you need to just find someone to top or bottom in, and oftentimes a non-sexual way, with sometimes even with your partner present. So maybe your your partner, maybe you're not good for a relationship dynamic within your relationship, and you just need to have your partner do certain kinks to you, learn how to safely and do certain kinks to you and do them safely. And so, or you want to do them to them. So you'd have to, if even if you're adding it, you still need to do some vetting. You still need to do some negotiations. You still need to have some really in-depth discussions, which is basically what a negotiation is, and then come to some agreements. In BDSM, we call those a contract. And so they don't have to be a formal written down thing, but we should come to some kind of consensus and agreement. And it definitely needs to be wrapped in consent. And we need to know each other's limits and boundaries. So whether you're looking for a new relationship or adding BDSM to a previously established relationship, the same rules really apply. They just apply slightly differently because the type of vetting for somebody you are already involved with and already know will be a little different than finding a potential play partner. And so, um, oftentimes what's intended as politeness may be taken by some as submission, and submissives may give off signals of dominance as they form emotional self-defense. And sometimes somebody who's laid back and mild mannered people, they can become aggressively dominant when they perceive a threat to a loved one. So dominance and submission. Sometimes people are managers in their job, and they in their but at home they're in their personality they're actually much more submissive, or find that they find fulfillment much more in being submissive. And so oftentimes your vanilla life, your outside of your kinky life, your personality doesn't always portray accurately who you are within BDSM. Sometimes people are looking for to express the opposite of what they are at work or in their career or in their family life with their children and things. If they're tired of always having to be in charge of the children, of course they're going to continue to be in charge of the children. But within BDSM, they can be they can give up control to somebody else and allow somebody else to be in control of their actions in and out of the bedroom. And so, excuse me. So, oftentimes, um, you will learn a lot about yourself. Sometimes your um, roles, sometimes your identity in BDSM doesn't necessarily fit. And so, um, we'll just wrap up with this one little bit here. And so, um, uh, some of the different titles, some of the different identities that are found in BDSM. We talked about top and bottom. That was a top is someone who gives, a bottom is someone who receives. Within that, there are people who are rope tops and rope bottoms. There are people who only perform certain kinks. And so, you don't, just because you are a top or a bottom doesn't mean that you have to necessarily, or that you're getting involved in BDSM. BDSM doesn't necessarily mean that you have to accept the complete package of BDSM. You can really explore just certain kinks that you're interested in. You don't have to take it all. You can pick and choose the things that you want to be a part of your BDSM life. Perhaps it's rope, like I said. There are people who are called riggers, and riggers are people that take rope off of the ground. They don't just do what's called floor work. They also oftentimes hoist people up, and they do suspensions, and oftentimes with rope, or sometimes incorporating other types of materials, tape, for instance, or maybe even people who are into hooks, like hooks that go through the flesh. Those are that's considered edge play. That's really extreme, not necessarily extreme in the sense that it is any more extreme than any other thing, but that it comes with a greater degree of risks and skill and technique involved. And so it's on the more edge or more extreme because of that, because it is in order to play with hooks, you have to know safety and technique. You have to know some of the anatomy of the person, and where to put things so that you don't cause, well, and within BDSM, we don't want to cause harm. We don't mind causing pain, but we don't want to cause harm to one another. And so, causing permanent, lasting harm to other persons is outside of the scope of BDSM. That's a different kind of sadism or a different kind of masochism. We're not looking for self-harm. We may just be looking for we're like We don't cut in order to harm someone. We're not involved in that kind of cutting, but we may cut artistically. Someone may cut artistically themselves, or they may let out a little bit of blood or whatnot within a scene because they like the pain, and they'll do it with safety involved, so that as not to harm, maybe not to even permanently scar the individual. So they'll take great care. And so um, I was just wanting to end with that just because you get involved in BDSM and some aspects of BDSM doesn't mean that you automatically have to get involved in the whole complete package. Just because you may find actually that you like some other things when you're exposed to them, or if you're exposed to them, but if you just like bondage, or if you just like impact, or you just like rough sex, or you just like a power exchange, or any of these different types of things. There's so many different ways to play. Maybe you just want to be dressed up. Maybe you're a man and you just want to be dressed up as a sissy and have to scrub the floor. You can take whatever kink that you personally want. Maybe you want to just be made to wear panties under your as a task underneath your work clothes at the construction site. And so maybe you just want, one aspect of BDSM. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to participate in all of the aspects. You really do get to choose somewhat what is within your limits and your boundaries, and what you consent to. All right. Well, I am Primal Piggy. This has been another episode of BDSM United podcasts. You can find us on Facebook at Whips, Chains, and Duct Tape, which is WCDT BDSM. You can also find me personally on Facebook at The Primal Piggy, all one word, The Primal Piggy. All right, thank you. Good luck in your endeavors to experiment with BDSM. We'll look more in a future podcast of more of these basics of BDSM, and more that is involved for people who are new in this year's current series. All right, have a good day.